Babes and Bullets, the continuing adventures of Sam Spayed. The dust had to be an inch thick on my desk. A thick layer of papers was forming around the base of the trash can. An empty bottle of scotch lay on the floor next to the couch where I had a business engagement the night before. Coffee, Sam? Kate wasn't much on keeping an office clean, but she could make a great cup of coffee. I still remember the day she came in looking for work. Dust had to be half an inch thick on my desk. A thin layer of papers was forming on the base of the trash can. Half-empty bottle of scotch sat on the floor next to the couch where I had a business engagement the night before. She wanted to be a secretary. She had all the requirements. A great body that would make your back arch. And she made a great cup of coffee. I gave her a job. That was yesterday. San Francisco is a beautiful city. Cable cars rolling, fog rolling off the bay, Chinatown, Golden Gate Bridge, wharf. She wished I lived there. Being a private dick isn't easy with a name like Sam Spayed. It takes a special breed to be in my line of work. The hours are long, the pace stinks, and you can't trust anyone. It's not a pretty job. But I've got all the requirements. I like babes and bullets. And I look good in a trench coat. More coffee, Sam? It was a slow day. The hours seemed to drag by like a Cubs versus Braves doubleheader. I decided to get a phone. As I was leaving the office, I found myself face to face with one of the most beautiful creatures I've ever seen. Her ears were like the pyramids of Egypt. Her eyes were limpid pools of gray with coal-black slits. Her whiskers swayed in the brisk city breeze like cattails on a frog pond in southern Louisiana in September. Sometime toward evening before 10, probably after 8:30. Where was I? Oh yeah, the broad. She was cute. Are you Spayed? I never know how to answer that question. So why did she come to see me? One mysterious problem drove her to a private investigator. And why me? There were 100 private investigators in town with better offices than mine. Who was she? I decided to find out. So what brings you here? And why me? There are 100 PIs in town with better offices than mine. Who are you? My husband was murdered. You're cheap. Tanya Otavi. Will you take the case? I had to think for a minute. Sure. How do you want your services paid, Mrs. Spayed? That'd be great. My mind took off like a greyhound after a rabbit at a raceway park. She was attractive and young. Judging from the way she was dressed, she was obviously tapping some big bucks. How would a girl get her hands on money like that? Of course, it all makes sense now. She marries an old geezer, has him killed, and inherits all the money. She hires a second-rate investigator to find the killer, who she double-crosses, and ends up scot-free. So, how old was your husband, Mrs. Otavi? 23. Of course. It all makes sense now. Her husband was obviously a ladies' man. He probably had felines in every alley. An Irish cat is known for his promiscuous nature. Tanya finds out he's unfaithful and has him snuffed. She hires a second-rate detective to find the killer, who she double-crosses, and ends up scot-free. It's one of the oldest shams in the book. So, what did your husband do for a living, Mrs. Tabby? He was a priest. Something wasn't right here. Wait a minute, doll. I thought priests weren't allowed to get married. He was Greek Orthodox, Mr. Spayed. Of course. A Greek Orthodox priest named Otavi. It all makes sense now. Call me Sam, please. What makes you think your husband was murdered? He drove off old mountain roads, and please. That's 40 miles away. He had no reason to be there. Besides, he was an excellent driver. Her lips started to tremble. I took her paws in mine. Go on, kid. Got work to do. I'll call you when I've got something. Why would someone murder a 23-year-old priest was beyond me. Still, stranger things have happened in this town. My first stop was the city morgue. It would be a few days before the funeral, so his body should still be in the condition it was when he was found. The entire story Tanya told me sounded like nothing more than an unfortunate accident, but her sincerity was no act. She believed that her husband was murdered. She didn't know how or why, but then that's my job. It was 11 a.m. Walking up the steps to the morgue, I saw my old adversary. It was Lieutenant Theodus Washington. Every time he crossed my path, it was bad luck. He was a black cat. Spayed, what brings you down here? Trying to find a client? Sure, Lieutenant. He's the one your blue boys shot in the back for jaywalking. Watch it, Spayed. I still have your license under investigation. Oh, yeah. Well, at least I know it's safe for a while. Spayed, don't push me. Wouldn't dream of it, Lieutenant. Have a nice day. The Lieutenant was still saying goodbyes as I walked into the morgue. I spotted an old friend, Bert Fleavish. He'd been working there ever since I was a snotty-nosed kitten. Sam, what brings you down here? Hey, Bert, I need to see a body. Who doesn't, eh, Sam? What's the name? Father Otavi. Oh, yeah, tough break, nice fella. You knew him? Oh, not really. I attended his church, St. Maurice, for about the last 6 months. We'd talk occasionally after services. I could tell Bert sort of liked the guy by the way he pulled out the drawer with the stiff. Tabby looked like he'd been worked over by the maulers of the Midway. It didn't surprise me. What was a guy supposed to look like when he goes through a guardrail fence and down a mountain canyon in his car? If his body hadn't been thrown out of the car while it was rolling over, it would have been burned up when the car caught fire and exploded. When's the autopsy scheduled, Bert? Autopsy? What autopsy? His wife thinks it was murder, Bert. Murder? Sam, the man died in a disastrous car accident. Simple as that. Bert, if things were as simple as that, I wouldn't have a job. Looking down at Otavi, I noticed some yellowish-brown coloration on his chest and stomach hairs. Hey, Bert, do you have any explanation for this? I pointed out the pigment in question. Ooh, could be almost anything. Transmission fluid, brake fluid, any kind of liquid from a car that can make a stain like that. Do you have his clothes and the items he had when it was discovered? Oh, sure. Am right here. He handed me a plastic bag filled mostly with his torn, shredded, and blood-stained clothes. I searched through the clothing, looking for anything that might suggest murder. Right now, it looked as though poor Otavi had just had a bad break on the mountain. His shirt was about the only item of clothing that was still recognizable, although it was badly ripped and blood-stained. I noticed the yellowish-brown stains were in the same location on the shirt that they were on the body. I had seen stains like this before, but where? Maybe someone would come to me later. The pockets were empty except for the stones and dirt from the fall down on the mountain. There was a curious little stone in the vest pocket. It was a very colorful one on one side, almost as though it were painted. The phone rang. As Bert went to answer it, I put the colorful stone in my pocket. I don't know why, really. Maybe I just like stones. Bert hung up the phone and asked if there was anything I needed before he put the body away. A clue, a motive, and a murderer. Good night, Bert. Sam? Yeah, Bert? It's noon. Next on the list was Father Otavi's church. I was still a couple of blocks from the church when I brushed by a big goon on the sidewalk with fists the size of babies. He grabbed me by the throat, dragged me into a darkened alley, and pounded me into the next year. As I lay there in a crumpled heap, I smiled to myself. I must be on the trail of something hot to rate a beating from this Neanderthal. I put my jaw back in place and pointed an accusing paw at my assailant. So, Clyde, I suppose you have a message for me? Yeah, I'm your landlord. You're 2 months late in rent. Right. I was still trying to figure out my landlord's involvement in this caper as I walked up the marble steps to the church. At the doorway, I was greeted by an elderly man wearing a robe. Are you the father here? Yes, but I have no children. What? I'm sorry, that's a small religious joke. Yes, I'm Father Felix. How may I help you? I'm Sam Spayed, P.I. I held up my wallet. Nice wallet, Mr. P.I. I'd like to ask you a few questions about Father Otavi. Certainly, Mr. P.I. Why don't you come inside? I entered the church and followed Felix to the kitchen. I sat at the table as the father poured us a cup of coffee. I would have preferred to have my own cup. What would you like to know, Mr. P.I.? Call me Sam. Was Otavi a good driver? Oh, yes. He was a driver's training instructor at Edison High in summer months. Do you have any idea why Otavi was on the old mountain road last Friday night? Yes, he was going to visit Mario Purr, one of our parishioners. She is a wealthy hermit who's been ailing of late. Why was he going there? Molly is a big contributor to the church. Father Otavi called on her every Friday night to help in any way he could. Does anyone else notice? It was Molly's wish that no one knows of his visits. Did he have any enemies you know of, Father? Where are you getting at, Sam? Just the facts, Father. Father Otavi was loved by everyone who knew him, especially the female parishioners. What do you mean by that? Just that he was an attractive man, and it was natural for women to be attracted to him. Of course. How old is Mayopur? 93. Rats. Although Felix shifted restlessly in his chair. Sam, I meant nothing carnal by the statement. However, on more than one occasion, Father Otavi had to put a woman's feelings in perspective. So, you don't think he ever gave in to temptation? Oh no. His only weakness was coffee. I rarely saw him without a cup of it in his hand. Yeah. Well, I think we all depend on a cup of Joe every now and then. Thanks for the information, and no offense intended, but this is really lousy coffee. Yes, I admit my coffee needs work. And the lady that normally makes our coffee left us recently. She made an excellent coffee. She's going to be hard to replace. In fact, I find myself doing her duties more often than my own. I see. Well, nice meeting you. It was only a few blocks back to my office. By the time I arrived, the men from the phone company had just installed my phone and were on their way out. Katie was in the other room. No calls yet, Sam. How about a cup of coffee? I sat down at my desk and stared at the phone. I thought I'd better call Tanya and let her know the progress on the case. Maybe she could give me something else to go on. Hey, Kay, do we have Tanya's phone number? 555-1234, Sam. Thanks. The girl might not be a great office cleaner, but she has a great memory. But why didn't I remember that number? It's sure an easy one to remember. Hello, Tanya. Sam Spayed. Miss Spayed, what'd you find out? Not much, really. Look, I stopped by your husband's church today and found out a few interesting things. Oh, really? Who'd you talk with? A Father O'Felix. Do you know him? Of course. Father O'Felix is my husband's assistant. Kinda old to be an assistant, isn't he? Oh, we really never thought of him as an assistant. He worked as hard as my husband with the congregation. In fact, he's been with the church all his life. Kay was setting the cup of coffee down on my desk. Well, anyway, Tanya, he mentioned your husband may have had some woman trouble at the church and Crash! Damn it, that's hot! Kay had dropped the cup of coffee on my desk and into my lap. It was hot enough to give a literal meaning to my last name. The cup had broken into several pieces on the desk. Sam? Hello? Sam, you okay? Look, Tanya, I'll call you back. Got a bit of a mess right now. I hung up. Sam, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking about. It's okay, Kay. Run downstairs and tell the maintenance we need a mopping bucket. I'll pick up the pieces of the mug. I could tell she was really upset about the mess. It was only coffee. Anyone can make a mistake, no problem. I'd fire her when she came back. I was soaked. I went to the sink to clean up. As I took off my vest, I saw a huge coffee stain covering my shirt. Wait a minute. Coffee stains. That's what they were. Otabi had coffee stains on his shirt. Why would a man that was dressed as impeccably as Otabi wear a coffee-stained shirt? Where did the coffee come from? And why am I talking to myself? I searched my vest pockets for the pretty painted stone I took from Otavi's vest pocket. I looked at it carefully. It was painted all right. A painted piece of ceramic on a coffee cup. Otavi must have been drinking coffee, which in turn caused the accident. It wasn't much to go on. How was I supposed to solve a murder when my only clue was a cup of Java? What was keeping Kay? Funny, she didn't seem to be the awkward type. I figured I'd better call Tanya to apologize for the interruption and get back to the case. Where did I put the phone number? Wait a minute. Tanya never gave me a phone number. So how did Kay know the number? Easy, Spayed. Don't go off the deep end. But the pieces were starting to fit together. Kay would know the number if Tanya's husband gave it to her. Could she be one of the felines infatuated with Father Otavi that Father Felix mentioned? Think, Spayed, think. Of course. She spilled the coffee when I mentioned talking to Father Felix about Otavi's wound trouble. Kay makes a great cup of coffee. So did the girl who recently left the church. The same girl I hired only yesterday. A girl who was infatuated by a man she could never have. So what was she to do? She spills coffee in his lap and drives him over a cliff. Something is not right here. Here's maintenance, Sam. It was Kay with an old tomcat carrying a mop. I know you murdered Father Otavi, Kay. What are you talking about, Sam? You loved him, didn't you? He didn't love... You loved him, he didn't love you. You couldn't have him, so you snuffed him. She fell to her knees, sobbing. Yes, I loved him. He didn't love me. I couldn't have him, so you what? So I left. You left? Yes. The thought of working at the church, so close to him, and not being able to have him was too much to bear. So I left. But I didn't murder him. The tears were streaming down her face and falling off her whiskers like rain off a pine tree. But the coffee stains, the pieces of ceramic coffee cup. I held the ceramic piece out to her quivering paws. We talked a few nights before his death at the church. We had some coffee. The crying stopped. He liked my coffee. I had to agree with Tabby. Gave me a great cup of coffee. He always drank from his favorite mug, Sam. She took the ceramic piece from my paw. This looks like a piece from that mug. I don't know how it got broke. I just ran out of suspects. Kay, do you have any duties at the church other than making coffee? I was Father Otavi's girl Friday. You certainly weren't his girl Saturday. Put a cork in it, Sam. Sorry. I sorted out his mail, answered the phone, filled his prescriptions, cleaned his robes. Wait a minute. Filled his prescriptions? Yes. Father Otavi was an insomniac. The coffee kept him awake. He needed very potent sleeping pills to help him doze off at night. Her expression softened to a sweet smile as she gazed into the distance. I remember him bragging that one of those pills could knock out a bull elephant. It took 2 to pull him to sleep, and that took an hour. Kay, stay here and help maintenance clean up this mess. Where are you going, Sam? To pick up a murderer, baby. I was packing my piece, although I didn't think I'd need it this time. It was pouring rain when I got outside. No matter, I was only going a few blocks. The marble steps looked cold and gray, almost depressing. Not what you expect from at the front of a church. It was 4 p.m. When I found Father Felix, he was kneeling before the altar. His head was bowed and his paws clasped in prayer. Asking for forgiveness, Father? His head turned slowly. Wet streaks from his eyes to his mouth were on his furry face. It looked as though he'd been crying for some time. I'm not worthy of being a father, he continued, sobbing. You don't have the equipment to be a mother. What? Sorry, pal. That's a small religious joke. Let's go. By the time the paperwork was done, it was 8 p.m. Lieutenant Washington was his usual charmer, as though Felix was being booked. It had been a long day. Thought I'd better check on Kay. She was pretty shaken up when I left. As I walked back to the office, I noticed the rain had stopped. It was snowing. I entered my office and found Tanya Otavi sitting on the couch. She stood up slowly, sobbing gently, put her arms around me. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I understood. She stopped hugging me and smiled softly. She gave me an envelope and walked quietly out of my life. She called after you left. It was Kay in the kitchen. I told her you were going to nab the murderer. She came right over. I didn't answer. My thoughts were still in the arms of a classy puss. There had better be a check in that envelope. Sam, how'd you know Father Felix killed Father Otavi? Otavi had to have left directly from the church to call on Mario Purr that night. because he was still drinking from his favorite mug when the crash occurred. Father Felix, the substitute on Friday, fixed that cup of coffee. Felix had filled Otavi's sleeping pill prescription and popped a couple into his coffee, knowing it would take Otavi an hour to get to the old mountain road 40 miles away. Like clockwork, Otavi fell asleep at the wheel and drove off the road. The motive was obvious. Which was? It was the old power struggle in the church routine. Okay. Old man gets passed over by younger man. Younger man gets power, notoriety, women, money. Old man gets older, bitter. Finally, out of frustration, the old man gets rid of the only thing in his way, the young man. With Otavi gone, Felix becomes pastor and gets what has eluded him all his life. Kay came out of the kitchen holding a bottle of my favorite scotch and 2 glasses. Sam, you're simply too much. She closed the door to the office. What's the scotch for, Kay? She set the bottle on the floor next to the couch and turned out the light.